happened in Sacrament meeting today. Not only did they discuss the topic of honesty, which is our topic today, but I was very moved by the youth. And I appreciate the spirit that they brought, not only in Sacrament meeting, but to the topic that we are here to discuss today. So thank you for those of you who remained in the room. That was a special treat for all of us. When I taught last month, I had to have a Temple Recommend interview right after. And I went out and sat in the foyer and waited. Was that me?
No, that's her hearing aid.
Oh, okay.
She can't hear that part.
That's okay. That's okay. As long as it's not me, I'm good. And I was sitting out there, and I thought, well, I should take a look at what next month's lesson is. So I opened up my book, and I read the first sentence in the manual, and I had an overt reaction to it. And as I contemplated this topic throughout the course of the month, I decided to give you the same overt experience. So that is what this piece of paper is. So everyone who has one of these should take this. I'm now going to give you the same experience that I had, okay? And all I want you to do is open it up. There's one sentence in there, one question. I want you to read it and tell me your immediate reaction to that question.
Now we can open these now so the immediate reaction.
Okay, the first question I have to ask is, how many people opened it before I directed you to do so? Anybody? That's it. Okay. You opened it halfway. Someone next to you told me not to do that. Okay, so I'm sitting in the foyer and I read this question. And this, if you open the manual, you'll find this is the very first sentence in the lesson on honesty. What would society be like if everyone were perfectly honest? So, what's your first reaction to that?
Zion.
Zion. Great. Awesome.
What's wrong? A lot of people will be unemployed.
Okay. We have unemployed people. Yes, ma'am.
You wouldn't have to lock our doors.
Okay. All right. That's a good observation.
We need to develop thicker skin.
Ah, yes. Thicker skin. All right. Anybody else?
I'm trying to figure out why it gave you such an overt reaction. I can't say.
Well, first I laughed out
That's
loud.
my feeling.
At first I laughed out loud.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And the second thing I thought of immediately was the I Love Lucy episode where Ricky and the Mertzes bet Lucy that she can't go 24 hours without telling a lie. And my husband thought it was amusing that I assumed you would have all seen that episode. I said, what are you talking about? Everyone has seen that episode. Everyone's seen I Love Lucy. So if that's not true, please do not shatter my hopes. But if you recall, and I watched this episode last night to remind myself of what a great episode it is. Lucy is very colorful, of course, and sort of exaggerates a little bit. And the Mertzes and Ricky call her on that, and they make a bet that she can't go 24 hours without telling a lie. And as you would expect, she goes to play bridge with her friends the next day. And of course, she's not only honest, she's brutally honest. Okay? And basically, makes all her friends angry and hurts their feelings, and because she just feels so free in telling the truth. And she's a liberated woman and can now tell the truth. And she comes home, and Ethel has to report on what happened at the bridge meeting, and of course she's one of the ones that's been put in her place as well, and she doesn't find it very amusing. Well, next thing you know, Fred gets his turn at it, and Ricky says, well, I don't understand what the problem is, and he encourages her to be honest with him, and she, of course, turns and tells him how much she loves him, how handsome he is, how talented, what a magnificent man he is. And he said, I don't know what your problem is, that didn't hurt me a bit. And then she proceeds to tell him the rest of the list, that he's a coward and whatever. Anyway, and so that was my immediate thought. That was my overt reaction. I laughed out loud and immediately ran through the I Love Lucy episode. And I'm thinking, I'm not really sure I want to live in a world where everyone's perfectly honest. Now, with that said, I have spent a month discussing this topic with almost anyone who would sit still long enough to discuss this with me. Because I think it's a very interesting topic. When I first brought it up that same day, I went over to visit Jan Morris, who I'm her visiting teacher. And I told her what my lesson topic was today, and she said, well, okay, like what's the big deal? And I said, you're kidding me, right? And she said, no. And I said, okay, so when you ask, does this dress make me look fat? You're asking for an honest answer. Is that what it is, ladies? You know, let me tell you right now, that is not what you're asking, okay? And none of you wants to hear the truth, okay? I'm not, yeah, if you're silly enough to ask the question, then I suppose you get what you deserve. But none of us are really asking that. That's my argument there. You're not really asking, does this make me look fat or whatever. I think you're really saying, am I going to humiliate me or you by wearing this out in public? And all you really want is for someone who loves you to say, you are gorgeous. And it really doesn't matter what you wear. That's all we're asking for. But when you start asking questions, you know, you really need to be prepared, I suppose, for the perfectly honest answer. I had a hand up over here. Yes, ma'am.
My mother always said, if you can't say something nice, don't say anything at all.
Well, there you have it. And I can tell you,
You just need to learn to ask the right questions.
yeah, women need to learn to ask the right question. There's no question about that. We need to make sure that you're asking what you really want to know, because the other is very dangerous territory. But with that said, as my overt reaction to that question, I thought, wow, that's kind of sad, isn't it? That was my first reaction. Because we're told in the scriptures that this is the way we're supposed to be, it's the way we want to be, it creates this fabulous society in which we can live, and where people are perfectly honest, not brutally honest. And I think people who take the occasion to be brutal under the guise of being honest are not being a whit more Christ-like than you would be if you didn't tell the truth. So I'm not trying to defend brutal honesty either. But, of course, we're supposed to be honest, as the youth reminded us of today. I read this lesson several times over the course of the month, and I'm telling you, ladies, if you go home and read this lesson, you're going to find that there is zero wiggle room in this thing. Zero. And the more I read it, the more I just went, wow, that's incredible. And when we go to get a temple recommend, which I was doing out in the foyer when I had my overt reaction, one of the questions is, are you honest in your dealings with, mankind, or whatever the question is? And you're not going to get a temple recommend unless you answer that question in the affirmative. And so I say to myself, I think, generally speaking, I'm an honest person. Well, we only have a few minutes today. What I want to do is just point out a few things that you and I need to go back and revisit. Because as I've had a month to contemplate honesty, I am becoming painfully aware that we are not honest all the time. Okay? We're just not. And part of that is how we get along in society, is by not being perfectly honest all the time. And we justify it, we rationalize it, we find all ways to get through that. Maybe even under the guise of being Christ-like. And that we need to kind of take a closer look. That's all I'm here to do today, is to pinch you just that much to get you to take a closer look. So we know that being honest is a principle of salvation, and that we need to be more like the Savior, who is honest in all things. So that part we get. The question is, what constitutes being dishonest? The lesson talks about three things: lying, stealing, and cheating. Let's just talk about lying for a minute. What are some ways that people like you and I, who have the gospel in our lives, who try very hard to live good lives, be engaged in good things, what are some of the ways in which we either do lie, have lied, or are tempted to lie? Yes?
I just did this yesterday. My mom called me on the cell phone, and rather than explaining to her where Paul and I were and what we're doing, we had started the park, and I just didn't wanna go into a big explanation, so I said, well, we're about ready to go in.